Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Mathagon guest speaker series, our final one of the 21-22 school year. I am David Porras, head of content at Mathagon and middle school math teacher, and it's my great honor to have Dr. Jennifer Saw with us tonight. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. Thank you, David. Very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. We'll get started at around 7:02, past the hour. Hey, Molly, you're already in the chat. Awesome. Welcome. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat, everyone, it's great to learn about who we have with us, maybe where you are in the world, your role in education. I will read a full bio about Dr. Saw in a little bit. As I said at the beginning, I'm a middle school math teacher and do some work for the content team at Mathagon. Hey, Molly, welcome. Hi, Jen. It is really exciting to have Jen with us tonight. I think we're going to have a great talk. We've had a wonderful guest speaker series over the course of this school year, and really excited to wrap it up with Jen tonight. Again, we'll get started in 30 seconds or so. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. Sean, a student teacher from Vancouver, British Columbia. That is wonderful. Thank you for committing yourself to education. It is great to have future teachers on the call. Stacy from Apache Junction, Arizona. Dr. Nicolette from Alabama, welcome. Bad weather. I hope you stay connected too. This is being recorded and it will be available on our Mathagon PD page and on YouTube after the fact. So if you miss anything, you can come watch it here. And Shirley, welcome from Georgia. Pamela, welcome from Ontario. Awesome. It's great to have a international crew with us tonight. All right, let's dive in. Let me pull up my screen here. All right, so welcome everyone again to the final talk in our 2021-22 Mathagon guest speaker series. My name is David Porras. I am the head of content at Mathagon and a middle school math teacher outside of Boston. The Mathagon team is really excited to conclude our speaker series tonight with Dr. Jennifer Saw and her talk titled Bridging for Students Math Strength Using Learning Trajectories. If you are new to Mathagon and our guest speaker series, I'm going to give a really quick tour of Mathagon and then turn it over to Jen. So Mathagon is a mathematical playground with best-in-class virtual manipulatives, engaging and interactive courses, and a wide variety of mathematical activities. Mathagon is free for teachers and students around the world. Everything I'm going to show you is totally open and free for everyone. Here I am at mathagon.org. I'm going to first head to Polypad by clicking on the blue button to launch a Polypad. Polypad is our open canvas for using virtual manipulatives to explore, create, discover mathematics. I'm just going to show you three really quick things. I'm going to go to polygons. I'll add a hexagon to the canvas and I'll surround it with these squares. I'll copy them really quickly using the C button on my keyboard. They're smart rotation and they snap in place to make building shapes like this really quick and easy for students. I'll take the hexagon, copy it, and once I've made a shape I'm happy with, I can do all sorts of things. I'm going to first copy this whole thing and put one over here. I can go back to this one. I'm going to join it together to make one polygon. I could change its color to purple. I could cut it into a number of pieces, however I want to cut it, maybe something like this, and see what I have with the pieces. I can flip it. But another really exciting thing that I can do here, you may have noticed I made the net of a hexagonal prism. So one option down here at the bottom is fold net. And when I do that, I get a 3D solid, a hexagonal prism. And then I can use the slider to unfold it and then click unfold and move a square out of the way and fold it again and see what happens. And you can kind of see inside of it, which is really fun. So all sorts of fun. I could spend an hour building and folding nets, but you're not here for that. We have a number of tiles in our section of geometry. In the number section, we have these prime factor circles. If you have played the game Prime Climb from Dan Finkellet over at Math for Love, you're familiar with these prime factor circles. You can pull a number apart into its prime factorization, and then you can put these pieces all back together and make any sort of combinations of numbers that you like. We have fraction bars. Let me show you the fifths here. I can put a fifth on the canvas. I can use a slider to shade it. I can give it a different name all the way up to 30 seconds. I'll stop at 14ths. I can use this bar to change the number of pieces, split it to move them all around, all sorts of fun with fraction bars. And the final thing to show you is just under probability and data, we have all sorts of coins and dice and spinners and random number generators. And what's really fun is they can all be spun and randomized at the same time. So I'm currently doing probability in 7th grade, and we're having all sorts of fun with the probability tools. You might want to learn more. You won't do it tonight because that's not the point of this webinar. But over here on the question mark, there is a help button. And if you click on help, the first option is our help and tutorial page, which is mathagon.org/PD. And this has pages on getting started, on user guides. We do a number of Polypad webinars. In fact, Molly, who's in the chat, is speaking at our final one 2 weeks from tonight. This is called Teachers Share How They Use Polypad. Here is our wonderful lineup of the 6 amazing educators who are talking about how they use Polypad in their work. So join us in 2 weeks to hear from these folks on how they use Polypad in their classroom. So this is at mathagon.org/PD. We have a number of tutorials. And here's our guest speaker series, which we are at right now. So you can go watch some of the other talks in the guest speaker series. Last thing to share, this was Polypad. We have a number of activities as well. We have a timeline of mathematics where you can explore mathematicians and artifacts throughout history. We have a multiplication by heart deck to learn your multiplication facts using spaced repetition. We have problems and puzzles. Go explore. This is more for middle school and high school. And finally, our lesson plan page, which has over 150 lesson plans, games, puzzles to explore with students. We just added one called End of Year Activities. So if you have 18 days left in the school year like I do, and you are trying to find engaging, fun activities for students, maybe go look at our end of year activities to create some joy and creativity in your math classroom. We have a Polypad art contest going on now, a timeline scavenger hunt, and so on. So all sorts of fun things there to go explore. Again, if you are brand new to Mathagon and you're interested in just exploring more, the best place to start is mathagon.org/PD. And there you'll find places to get started. So thank you for allowing me that Polypad tour. I'm going to do a brief intro of Jen, and then we will get going with the webinar. Dr. Jennifer Suh is a mathematics educator in the Graduate School of Education at George Mason University. Dr. Suh teaches mathematics method courses in the elementary education program and mathematics leadership courses for the Mathematics Specialist Masters and PhD programs. She directs the Center for Outreach in Mathematics Professional Learning and Educational Technology, COMPLETE, and provides professional development focused on mathematics content and teaching practices. Her research focuses on using lesson study with school-based teams to develop high-leverage mathematics teaching practices and deepen teachers' content knowledge through an understanding of children's development of mathematics learning trajectories. Develop K-8 problem-based modeling tasks to promote an equitable access to 21st century skills for diverse student populations in STEM disciplines. Currently, her project EQ STEM, Advancing Equity and Strengthening Teaching and Elementary Mathematical Modeling, focuses on promoting an equitable participation of all students engaging in rigorous mathematics through modeling. It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Jennifer Suh. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
Thank you, David. I'm really excited, and I'm so very excited that I get to round up this year's series. So when I started planning for this session, it really was an idea of celebrating all the work that I've been able to do this past year with teachers, really tapping into the geniuses in school. I know some of you guys work as coaches or math specialists, and so really getting to work with teachers and looking at the wonderful work that they do with students and the brilliance that students bring. So that's kind of the topic for our session tonight. But I do want to start with just, I know we're kind of starting with a very heavy heart. And I appreciate you joining me, but I know it's not a regular day. We all work in elementary or middle and high schools, and so it's a very tough time. So I just want to take a moment um, for all the lost ones in Uvalde, Texas. We're just thinking of everyone, and I just wanted to give a moment for everyone to just, think about um, think about our loved ones. So I thought I would start with David talked a little bit about my research interest, but I think that it's really interesting to kind of come to Mathagon to share tonight because I actually started, and some of you guys were talking about dissertations, and I actually started my dissertation on virtual manipulatives. And back then, this is going to date me, National Library of Virtual Manipulative was the cutting edge, and I loved looking at virtual manipulatives and how those affordances, really supported diverse learners. And I'm still continuing to use technology in that way to look at how we can really advance students' thinking through inquiry and collaborative problem solving. And David, I think you share a lot of example of that. So I'm very excited to explore more. But as I said, math modeling is a way to really connect to students' lived experiences. And so today I'll get to share some of those stories. And working with teachers with lesson study, it's been really great to kind of unpack learning trajectories to really kind of see how the development of math ideas come to be. And I want to kind of piggyback on all those ideas. But I also want to mention that I've been watching a lot of the webinars, especially the ones that are recorded. I went to Desiree's live, and I'm going to piggyback on some of these key messages. I loved when Sanel said, have kids fall in love with math. Um, and when Dan said, play can be rigorous. And if you have a rich task, kids will just explore and continue to explore. And I think Desiree also talked about, this idea of math identity and seeing oneself as doers and make sense makers. I think those messages really resonated with me. So I wanted to leave you with a message that hopefully will stick. This idea that I want you all to kind of think about how do we really build on students' math strengths to empower them. So I just kind of want to start with a few stories, but maybe in the chat. You can think about a source of strength that you had this year. Any source of strength that helped you get through this school year. I know we're almost close to the end of the school year. So take a moment in the chat. What was your source of strength this school year?
What a great question. We were chatting at the beginning about what a long school year this has been for a lot of us. I'll chime in as we were waiting for things to come up in the chat. One of mine for me was definitely my colleagues. I am really fortunate to have colleagues that I've worked with for a really long time. They're some of my closest friends. And so to be able to go into a building every day and just be around people that I really am connected well with was a source of strength for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I'm seeing our kids just having flexibility this school year, family, Pam. Um, so I also asked a few of my colleagues and teachers, and so some of them were saying breakfast duty, greeting kids each day, and the students and their smiles. Some, really exercise, kind of balanced their lives. Pets, colleagues at school, family events. I think we've started to do a little more family events at schools, and that's really been fun. Um, and yes, collaboration with peers. Students having fun, learning math and asking for more. That was one of the comments from a teacher. For me, it was, I'm going to share my source of strength. Definitely Piper, my pandemic puppy. I can't forget that. She's been the joy. But also, like you all said, colleagues. I get to work with elementary school and collaborating with them through lesson study and other math modeling work, and then getting to observe, obviously. That's what I love about lesson study. And so today I want to share some stories from the classroom. I also got to work with our state, Virginia Department of Ed. They came to us and we collaborated on a project right during the pandemic, actually. We wanted to build up some resources to support teaching and learning. And we knew that there were lots of resources, but we wanted to kind of provide a learning trajectory based curricular resource. And this was actually done with classroom teachers and coaches. So, again, like when I say tapping into the geniuses in our school, I seriously mean it. We worked with 30 plus teacher designers who designed and then implemented it. And we're still in this process of design research where we're improving it. But that's where we really got to collect a lot of the great resources we have. And I don't know, I guess a lot of you guys are from Common Core states, but we're not. So we can't use a lot of the Common Core aligned resources. So this was a great project that I really enjoyed. And when we designed this, I kind of want to just share some of the big ideas because these design principles kind of play into tonight's message in building on strength. And, these were some kind of ideas from NCTM that was kind of delivered when the pandemic started. Like, how do we focus on students' strength and keep the joy and humanity in teaching and learning? And these productive ideas really helped me. And as I was working with teachers, this really helped us center our work. But also Beth Corbett's work on students' math strengths really helped thinking about how students have dispositional strength, process strength, and of course, math content. And so oftentimes we think about this very far right when we think about math competence, right? All those number sense, fraction sense, spatial sense. But I love how catalyzing change in this book, Strength-Based Math, talk about broadening this notion of math competence. Because we know that kids who persevere and who have creative and novel approaches are also mathematically strong and smart. Kids who take risks, uh, kids who see math as a way of understanding the world. Wow, that would be a math strength we would want in all of our students. This idea of being able to listen to each other's ideas, which is a process and a practice, kids learn so much better with explanations that kids give to each other than sometimes a teacher explanation. So I just wanted to share this, and I will share the whole PowerPoint with you. I probably violated the rule about how many words you can have on a slide because I just want you guys to have the resources like this slide. Research shows, and this is decades of research on complex instruction, that teachers have a really important role in assigning competence. And, you have all these researchers, but this idea of highlighting students' math strengths and actually being able to name some of these intellectual contributions is actually so very powerful in how we actually elevate students and really contribute to their math identity, right? I think Desiree talked a lot about this. This idea that, sometimes, especially when we've had something like the pandemic, I mean, this is unprecedented, but you might fall into without really knowing what students are missing or what they lost, that deficit base. So we try to focus on how do we shift our mindset to an asset base, right? And so resisting this deficit thinking to a strength-based approach. How do we support teachers and ourselves to just start thinking this way? So I just want to share, there's a great article. I will have it as a link, but Lisa Jilks shared a really nice article about how she worked with teachers watching videos. And what she had was something that we use with kids all the time, sentence stems. And her sentence stem is on the right, and I actually want to kind of try it out tonight. And this is something that might help you and your other colleagues continue to notice student strength. So in this particular lesson story, we're going to visit a classroom, just a first grade classroom recently that did a lesson study, a math modeling lesson actually, on diversifying their library. And the teacher gave them $20 and a Scholastic book order, and they were trying to figure out how can they spend $20 to add books to their collection. And so using Lisa Jilk's article and the sentence stem, we're going to think about just watching a very short video clip and look for the smartness. They talk about the math smarts. What strengths do you see in the learner? Or what did the students do or say that was mathematically smart? And the prompt is that you're just going to type in, you're going to type in the chat. I think it was really smart when Mia is going to be our first video. Mia did something, and just try to find something that she did, and then say, I think it was smart because dot dot dot. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a chance to watch the video, and it's pretty quick. So this is Mia, and I hope that the video will play. Let's try. There's no sound yet, so don't worry. But this is where Mia is trying to find a book collection up to $20. And so she.
I have $10, $5. $50's like one, two, three,
So you only spend
16, 17, 18, 19. Where's my team? Oh, this is 19. 19.
Is that enough? Do you have enough money?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll give you a moment to make an observation, and if you want to just take a moment to write.
It was really joyful to watch her, like, just go through it and talk about it. What a great clip to share. I don't want to be the first one to go. Maybe we'll wait for a few to come in the chat, but I know we're a little.
Sure. So one of the things that we do while you guys are typing, I'll just kind of share a little bit of some of the support that we give. You know, we all have standards, obviously, and teachers are always thinking about standards. So we kind of start with, like, what did you notice about the student and the strength? And so I'm seeing Tim is saying, he was smart when Mia wrote her sum on the paper because it allowed her to hold on to that value while sense making. I love that. I think it was smart when Mia used multiple concrete tools to help her count. I think it was smart because it helped her make sure the answer was correct and see her thinking out loud. Yeah, the visible thinking. Yeah, so, you know, you notice a lot of strange, but, you know, definitely, I think Louisa is noticing that she counted out to 2 and then the 15 before the blocks. And it was smart because she kept the parts in her mind, like part, whole, right? So what we started to do as we were watching was starting to think about, like, what does Mia know how to do? What's her strength? She can direct model, count from 1 with counters. She has correspondence. She can count with her fingers. She's resourceful with physical manipulatives. When she didn't know how to write a number, she used her hundreds chart, right? So she is very, very tool savvy. She knows what to do. But this idea of, you know, having students kind of think about strategies and tools, she just knew exactly where to get the counters. She asked for my hand when she ran out, right? So definitely those are the strengths. And so then the teacher started to say, okay, where would I go next with Mia? And that's where they might say something like, oh, I noticed she was counting all. And, you know, we're kind of working on counting on and holding some numbers. And Tim was saying, you know, it was really smart that she wrote some sums. So perhaps really working on how to see that number. And a lot of research talk about, like, this idea of numeric composites, just holding 9 in my head and then counting 4 more to become more efficient. Perhaps using base 10, you know, place value, right? Knowing if you have 10 and 5, that it's 15. And so this idea of building on math strengths became something that we used frequently. And the learning trajectory helped us see where the kids were in the continuum and then place them so that they can see where to advance them. None of those languages of, oh, she can't do this or she can't, that never came up because we were not interested in that. We just wanted to know, what can she do? Where is she on the learning trajectory? And how do we move them forward? So you see a variety of work here. You can see the clever way that the student is even partitioning 2 and 10 and 7 and counting on, lots of tallies. And this student made it up to $20. So you see a lot of different strength. But I just want to take a moment. The next video clip is Andy and Byron. I think I love watching videos and I hope you guys too. Of course, analyzing student work is, of course, the next best thing. But you wonder what's happening with Andy and Byron. Remember, we had $20. So just kind of, maybe you know the cliffhanger here, but maybe in the chat, if you have any notion of what's going on with Andy and Byron, why is Andy at 19 and Byron at 21? All right, so while you guys are thinking about that, I'm going to cue up the next video clip. Again, if you have a moment to kind of write in the chat, that would be great. And again, the same prompt. But I want you to think of this partnership, and I hope you can hear it.
Check, but I don't think so. I think you're right. I don't think there's any more for $1.
I need one more. We don't have enough for all of these.
So if we don't have any books that cost $1, can you buy any more? No.
Well, me and Byron, let's try one.
Let's try. If you guys work it out together and show me on your papers, I'll allow it.
That one? Okay.
Did you hear what Andy's idea? What did he say? Andy, tell Byron.
We could share that $1.
And then what would that give you?
$2.
Is there anything on here for $2?
Yeah.
So do you guys think we could share and buy a book together? Good idea. So you guys want to work together to show that, though. Showing it.
Okay, now let's image this.
That's not how money works. Sharing the money doesn't give you more.
You know what the top here is?
Talk to Byron.
Yes.
Okay, so then how much?
Me and Byron split $1. Tomorrow will be $1.
How are you going to do it? When we present, when you tell us your plan, what do you guys have to do?
I did him $1 for 5 to 3.
And what's your total?
19.
And Byron has?
21.
We'll stop there. So take a moment. David, what's your reaction while others
Well,
are...
I mean, it's so joyful, and this isn't a response to the question. I'll allow that to come in the chat, but just want to give a shout out to that teacher who probably wasn't planning on that and just in the moment was like, of course you can do that. And I'm sure other teachers might in that moment have like, nope, you got to spend 20, and which is a normal teacher reaction, right? But to have the confidence and the awareness to be like, yeah, do whatever you want, allowed him to feel so proud of that, right? He was telling the other teacher, and I'm sure went home and told his family, right? I got to share $1 with my friend, and
Yeah.
build on that excitement of the kids. Is such a master.
Right. And so,
moment.
we think about like math modeling in the early grades. What does that look like? Like they're optimizing, right? They're optimizing the $20. Like there was nothing for $1. So they could have just left it unspent. But no, they had a great plan. I'm seeing some comments in the chat. Luisa says, I think it was smart when Nicolette says, I think it was smart when Andy thought about putting both his and Byron's work together, right? To have enough. Because one person was over and one person was $1. And, they actually figured out that, yes, they both have, together they're spending 40. Yes, definitely. It's a safe classroom to take risks. Shared resources, absolutely. Lisa's saying that when Andy and Byron can work together, buy together. I think it was smart because they could work together to accomplish a goal. Absolutely. So I wanted to share this because I think you also see that rich tasks that are relevant and real and open can really sustain interest. Like kids were, you could see the kids cutting the circular, gluing them. There were times when kids went over and they kind of took the circular off or the little clip off, and then they substituted. Like they had a $5 book, but then they said, okay, that's going to be too much. That's 23. So I'm going to take 3 off and find another book for 2. That's just so bright for them to do that. And quite honestly, first grade, it's not about adding multiple add-ins, but look at how many add-ins here, right? It's not just part, whole, it's part, whole, right? So this idea that when you have a rich task, kids just do marvelous things is just a really great example, I think, illustrated here.
And
then
I just want to give like a shout out to the task itself. How can we make our classroom library more diverse as opposed to just here's $20. What books do you want to buy? I'm sure that caused maybe an audit to some degree of their current library and maybe who's not represented and who do we need to have more representation of, which isn't the point of the talk right now. But I just want to give that.
That is definitely the point of the
wonderful
work.
task.
Yeah. Thank you, David, for noticing that. I know I can't go into the depth of our work with math modeling, but a lot of our community-based tasks are about equity and how to, this teacher asked the kids to look at their library and to make the library more fair. And when they couldn't find a book in their library that was like them, they felt it. And they felt it for their friends. In fact, they picked books for their friends. There was a level 1 student who just came to the country, and he gets very excited when this teacher reads a book in Spanish. And this teacher's pretty like genius and marvelous. But she would read in her Spanish. She's not a fluent Spanish speaker, but just to kind of provide that student a connection, she'll read in Spanish. So the kids decided that they needed a book that was in like bilingual, right? Multilingual. So thanks for noticing that. And learn more. I will share the math modeling website where we're really trying to develop more tasks like that. But, I'm really having fun with this because, I'm seeing how learning trajectory can kind of play a role even in these open-ended tasks. Picking a learning goal, looking at where students would go with that, and then selecting some activities. And that was the whole premise of our work with the Math Strength website. Again, I talked about lesson study, but I know we have a lot of coaches who do lesson study, but the centerpiece is what I really kind of try to focus on. What does learning trajectory entail? And Jerry Confrey talks a lot about like those big ideas, strategies, representations. I don't like the word misconceptions, so I say conceptions because kids come with so many conceptions. And then models and definitions. This idea of patterns of development of ideas, and then example. These are some of the resources we use. I think some of the books you probably know about, but I'll share a reference list as well. Maybe it's going to be your summer reading list. I also love some of the work from OGAP, the Ongoing Assessment project, where they do look at some learning progressions, and we use this a lot in our lesson study, especially with counting and addition and subtraction and multiplication. So I kind of use this picture because I know a lot of people use different kinds of like progression as a ladder. I love Jerry Confrey. She has a rock climbing rock. And this kind of looks like just a line plot, a cluster of, dots. And kids are all over the learning trajectory, and it's not linear. And that's kind of what I was trying to share here, right? But they kind of cluster around, and we try to develop students' deep understanding around this. And so perhaps like when we're looking at the previous lesson, counting all, students are counting all, we want to move them to counting on, and that gets to the additive thinking. We want them to understand 10ness, right? The composite of 10 ones. We talked about this idea of counting on, requires kids to kind of chunk that number and put it in their head, right? Then that helps them kind of skip count, right? And then we also see that, wow, this repeated addition, chunking sevens is actually an idea of a composite unit. And that's what makes multiplication a very novel idea for kiddos. And seeing 7 as a unit is this idea of unitizing. And Fosno did a lot of work with that. So then we also get to really these ideas of multiples, break apart, compensation, these great strategies. So we use all of this to really support students' strength-based instruction. So let me share this is the second story, where the teachers did a snack sharing. And this was done in 2nd and 3rd grade, actually all the way up to 6th grade. But I do have a 3rd grade example, a 2nd and 3rd grade example. This one actually was a formative assessment that we did. And oftentimes we do a formative assessment to see where kids are. And I love just learning that the word assess comes from assedere, a Latin word. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, but Latin's a dead language, right? So I don't know anyone who will correct me, but I love the idea that it means to sit besides. To assess means to sit besides the learner, right? And so we didn't sit next to these learners, A and B and C, but what can you notice about what these students know? What strengths do you see in the chat? If you want to just kind of make some noticings. It's great to hear, Nicolette, that you guys are using OGAP in Alabama. That's awesome. I will also share some other great resources like the Learning Trajectory website by Clemens and Samaras, and Jerry Comfrey's website. It's called the Math Mapper, and it's more upper grades. But what do we notice about A, B, C?
Yeah, I notice in B that student is using a grouping representation as well as hopping up a number line that jumps up the number line.
Yeah, and I love the Mathagon number line. We notice even in A that there are 9 groups of 3.
Yeah.
The product here, 29, is a little off, but it's pretty close, right? And yes, you see that there's 9 groups of 3, absolutely. So it's interesting how Luisa said that, because C is actually, you see 3 groups of 9. Counting by ones, grouping, equation, lots of things. So yeah, I think Nicolette, the student, was counting by ones, the one that you see on the left, and just maybe overcounted, which a lot of kids will do, right? They're, again, the counting all. Maybe moving students into that composite unit would be the next step, but definitely. And Molly, yes, absolutely. The image is very accurate. There's not another dot that makes it 4. But I wanted to kind of share like a Mathagon tool that I love. And I think this is kind of interesting because the student that did draw that, right? And this is so cool because you can reorder it. And they can see how this is like, this idea of commutative property. But what I also like is that, this particular picture actually might be easier for kids to use some compensation. Like they might say, you know what, 1 more would make it 10. And I know 3 times 10 is 30, but I just added 1 more to each. So that I'm going to subtract 3 and get 27. So this idea that like this student, if it was a bare number problem, 9 times 3, I might use 3 times 9 myself, because who wants to draw 9 circles and 3 dots and count it all? So again, I think you can see how students can have different strategies, and you can leverage that in a way that's very useful. Again, this idea of assigning competence and actually, highlighting the commutative property. And I think that is what you see. So I share this example because a pre-service teacher used this idea of using a learning trajectory. And this is another progression that you see from OGAP, where they go from the additive, and these are visuals that you guys are so familiar with, the partial product, right? All of that. So I think it's really nice that they put these together. But what I want to share with you is one pre-service teacher came to me, and she was assessing her student. And for some reason, she's like, I don't understand why sometimes a student gets the answer correct, and sometimes she's off. I think she's estimating. But it wasn't until she sat beside the student that she realized that this student knows how to draw 5 by 7 and can write 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7, knows that it's 5 groups of 7, but was counting all and would miscount just like the previous. And so this is where then our bridging activities came, right? We already know that this is our goal, that we want to develop student understanding. So then you think, well, what would come next? What do I want to work on? And so she found this great technology tool. This is actually from Illuminations. And I'll just show you a little preview. It's called Bunny Times. And you can actually click on some feature that creates a fog, right? So when I was doing my research on virtual manipulatives, what I loved about technology is the affordances. You can't create a fog in front of like your base 10. Like, I mean, you could probably put a piece of paper and hide it, but how exciting is it to look for like how many carrots could be hidden? And so it kind of pushes the kids to think about, well, what do I see? I see a row of 5. I mean, I see 5 carrots in the first row, and start to count by 5s. So this idea of a composite unit becomes much more explicit when we have tools that actually constrain some of the thinking, right? Constrain it in a good way, right? Because we're kind of forcing them not to count all, but to count by groups. So I just wanted to share an example from a pre-service teacher, because we actually have a pre-service teacher tonight, don't we? Thank you for being here. You're going to be an excellent teacher, I can tell. All right, so that was just an example of how kids, how the teachers were using these ideas of a learning trajectory, right? We love that word subitizing. I love, all those dot flashes or flashcards that are dots. But I also love, the flashcards that you guys have, because it is about this idea of subitizing and this idea of unitizing, right? Which is such a key idea. So I just wanted to share some great activities, but this is where the LT can come into play to sequence the math learning. All right, so again, this is some research that shows that this idea of a composite unit is kind of a really good bridge to understanding. There's also really cool tools for distributive property like partial products, and this is actually from the Math Learning Center. And I'm just like having fun with all these virtual manipulatives where you can actually create a fact and have kids break it apart. Maybe they don't want to break it apart like this, but they say, I know my 4 times 8, let me put this over. I can 4 times 7, and they can double 4 times 7 to get the answer. So the product. So this idea of derived facts, becomes a really accessible tool for teachers to use with kiddos when you do use this great technology. All right, so my last story. Yes, go ahead, David. You have
I know. I just want to add something that what's really powerful. There's a lot of powerful things about these examples, but what is standing out for me is the importance of sitting with individual students and having those in-depth conversations to listen to their thinking, to find out where they currently are, and then make that plan, right?
Yeah.
I feel like oftentimes there's this speak of let's find out where students are now and let's not call it a learning loss. Let's learn about where they are and celebrate that. But that next step of building on that, and what do we do to go from where they are now? Now that I really understand it after having this conversation, how do I go forward is that really crucial next step, right? That I feel like I'm not doing as much as I should.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And that's exactly what our state math supervisors were telling us. Like we're pretty good at finding where kids are or what they're missing, because we've been, I guess, in teacher education, error analysis was a big part of instruction in teacher ed, right? But then you do tend to kind of start looking for gaps. And then without knowing, you become very deficit oriented because you're looking at gaps only. So we want to shift that mindset, David. Like we want to think about, well, what are the kids coming with? And if I, as a teacher, know the learning trajectory, then I don't ever have to say they can't. I just know where they have to go. And so those sequence of activities become the basis of our conversation. And our conversations in professional learning communities have been so much more productive because of that shift.
And like, what a gift for teachers to have those things all mapped out. So if you identify where students are, what those next activities, lessons, and things should be in the sequence is.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that. So the last story, because I had 3 stories that I wanted to share, is this one 4th grade task that we did recently. It was an upcycling STEM kind of activity, environmental friendly. Probably Earth Day was around the time we did it, so it was actually a good segue. But we were looking at plastic bags and how they can make jump ropes, and they watched the video clip. It's quite artsy to create these jump ropes. But they actually braided these plastic bags, and they needed to think about, like, how do we make some jump ropes out of these plastic bags, keep them out of the environment, and also give us some good exercise, because we have some sedentary folks who are always in front of computers, right? So they watched the video. In our math modeling, we ask kids to think about, what do you know, what do you need to find out, because we want to kind of not give them the quantities, have them think about important quantities. And so they started to kind of see that there are certain information that's given, like 3 bags will make 12 inches. But then they had to figure out, well, what's a good size, good length? Because, my husband's 6'2", and he can do jump ropes. But then when I use it, I kind of have to wrap it around a little bit, So this idea of what was great for an adult might not be great for a 3rd grader. So they did a lot of good conversation. They tested it out. Some people had a formula that if it comes to your armpit, it's a perfect height or length of a jump rope. But they came together with some ideas, and then they had 5 classrooms. They want to be fair and make sure that they had, because during recess it's not very fun when you can't jump around or do stuff. So they talked a lot about what they know, what they need to find out, kind of like what we do in science with KWL charts, right? So they talked about rules, actually tools that they also use, and then they started to just kind of start planning for this, right? And they decided, you know what, we're going to make 10 for each class. That sounds like a nice number. You can share, you can, make sure that there's enough, but then not one, you probably will have other kids doing kickball, so you don't need, 30 per class. So they decided 50 jump ropes would be their goal. And then that's where the math work started, right? So just take a moment. This is a lot of, and it's kind of small, I'm sure, for you all. But just take a moment to look at the student work, and then think about what you notice, what kinds of representations.
I see some good mentioning of skip counting in that first one, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you skip count, like how great that students are using that language in their explanations. Even on that one on the far right, when they're doing the 24 plus 24 plus 24, like showing how they're putting the 2 24s together, or 3 of them to get 72, which is really nice.
You might also wonder, David, like, did these kids know how to use a table right away? Well, actually, no. They had a previous modeling task where they had so many numbers on their paper. And I think Dan Meyer said this once, right? Give kids a headache, then give them the right? So they had a big headache because they had so many numbers all over their paper. Then they realized, oh, a table can help us look for patterns. And so they actually remembered that, and they started using a table to keep track of how many bags per feet, because that's information they knew. And then they realized, we want an 8-foot long. And so that's where the little star is here, right? And 1 JR is a jump rope, right? So a little abbreviation going on.
Yeah.
And so you see a lot of kids skip counting, like you said, this idea of a table to keep track. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how this might lead to ratios and proportional thinking. But they started to see, like, what was happening as they went down. It's, growing by 3. We are adding 3 bags each time. And in this student work, you see instead of 1 unit being the feet, 1 foot equals 3 bags, they started to think about, oh, well, I know one jump rope equals 24 bags.
Mm,
Start using that as
mm.
a unit. Remember, they had 50 bags that they wanted to, 50 jump ropes that they wanted to make. So one kid decided, you know what, instead of doing 240 times 5, I'm just going to use this easy number, 120, and then multiply this by 10 because that's
So great,
easier,
right?
right?
Proportional thinking at its
Exactly,
core, right?
right? Doubling and halving that
Yeah.
idea. Um,
And this great comment about the importance of labels. They needed the labels here,
yes,
not because their teacher told them to have labels on your answer, but it was really important. Are we talking about feet? Are we talking about ropes? Are we talking about bags?
yep,
It's crucial
absolutely,
here. It
absolutely.
matters, right?
And so they compared their strategy and they looked for something similar. This was great conversation because, we don't want to just do a show and share. We want to actually have the connection at the share part, right? Like what do we notice about these two strategies and how are they, similar, and what different strategies did we see? And this idea of multiplied by, 240 times 5 versus 120 times 10, that, gets at that doubling and halving idea. So I think Nicolette said this, right? This idea that some kids sometimes when we're working with ratio, what's kind of tricky is that you kind of forget the units, right? What are we talking about? Another big idea is this idea of like if you are equal means that you're kind of able to both of the quantities are getting larger and smaller by the same scale, right? That idea is so important. Um, and this idea of correspondence and covariation is a very important algebraic, idea that, when you look across, do you see a pattern, right? Actually, these kids were thinking, I think 2 feet, I can, I know it's doubling the 3, so it's 6, but you can see 6 divided by 3 is 2. So this idea of what's happening across, but also what's happening as we go down, right? So it's increasing by 3 on this side, and here is increasing by 1. That idea is all developing proportional reasoning. And you might think, well, that's a 6th grade standard, right? 4th graders can do it, right? And that's what we're finding with even our math modeling tasks. Like when we give them a task that they care to solve, they actually kind of start drawing resources that they have, the math strength that they have to solve a problem. Maybe it's not the most efficient yet, but that's when you kind of interject a new idea and like, oh my gosh, that makes it so easy, right? Again, this idea. Um, so this is the other site that I was mentioning, the Math Mapper. There's a Learning Trajectories website for primary, and then this Jerry Comfrey's work is really more in the upper grades, middle grades, and they talk about this idea of building up with ratios. This idea that covariation is two quantities changing together is such a big idea. So I just kind of threw some research because I know teachers love research and connecting it to the work. But this is going to be the ideas that develop functional thinking eventually, right? So although I started with our first grade story, we came all the way to middle school and how kids are developing their understanding. This multiplicative reasoning starts developing elementary grades. And if we could develop their math strength, they're going to be very confident in their math thinking. They'll have a lot of different ways to solve it. And so I think the first lesson story really tells us that when kids are given a rich task, they're pretty motivated and they'll try a lot of different strategies, especially when they know that the books that they pick will be in their library. The teacher used her scholastic points and some of the funds that she had to get new books. And so they actually saw that the choices they made came to reality. I think the second story that I want you guys to take, like the message is like this idea of formative assessment, really sitting beside and listening, right? I know that we have a lot of students and a lot of needs, but I think just sitting down just for a little moment helped that student. She was counting all, but all she needed, and she had so many other ideas about multiplication, and she just needed to know, what do I do with that 7? How can I chunk those? Or how do I use fives? Maybe counting by fives is easier instead of counting all. And then the last story I think is this idea that when you can actually spot these strengths, you understand the learning trajectory, you can actually advance kids beyond even the standard. And that's when they say, teach me more math so I can solve this problem. And we actually heard that from a kiddo. which is really fun. And that's, I think, a source of strength for our teachers. Again, I just wanted to leave a little time for us to kind of share some ideas or talk a little bit about it. But I wanted today's session to really help you think about how you might spot students' strength and build on their math power. I think empowering students to be math thinkers and math users is so important, because we use math to make decisions in our life every day, right? Buying a new car, figuring out how much food my little puppy Piper needs, or how many, pit stops I'm going to have to make as I'm driving to Florida this summer with Piper in tow. Again, I'm a little obsessed with my pup, but it's my source of strength. But I want to thank you all for joining me, and I would love to hear some thoughts, some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks,
If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I've put the link to the slide deck in there a few times. I know I'm adding this list of resources to the top of my summer list of things to go through. All these links to great tasks and the learning trajectories is really a powerful set of resources. And with everything out there online about how to improve teaching, to know you can have some places to go to with clear resources is so helpful. So thank you for sharing all of those so freely. Here's a comment. It's refreshing to shift from deficits to strengths. Absolutely. And that came really clear in the talk, Jen.
Yeah. I think, our teachers really get the strength really from the students. So when students kind of see themselves as math doers and learners, one of the teachers I talked to today, actually, we were interviewing some of the teacher designers. She said, we had a student who was absent so much and, during virtual learning, never really showed up. But this year, as she sat down and really worked with the student, one thing she noticed was that the absence just disappeared. The student started to come to school every single day. And I think it's because the student realized his teacher cared enough to sit down and really listen to his math thinking. And so that was just gave me so, chills, because it was so exciting. And so I just think that those are things that, we can't compromise. This is something that I think is so important. I think, Lisa, we hear a lot about the gaps in the learning loss, and we're really trying to steer away from this idea. Kids came back with other learning strength. Perhaps, they're more tech savvy, perhaps. Maybe they're using virtual manipulatives. I know our teachers learned virtual manipulatives in a way that, it was an exponential growth in how teachers learn how to use technology. So, yes. And Nicolette, I love that, kids, all our students have something to bring to the math table. And the teacher today, the coach that I talked to today said, you know what, it's providing these resources, especially the sequenced kind of learning activities to help students, is actually giving a student the tools, the spoon and the fork, right? You could have a big steak, she said, and you may not give them there might not be any utensils, and the student might not have access to eating this delicious steak. She's like, well, providing these kind of sequenced activities provides them with the tools and they can enjoy. So I just love that analogy.
It's a beautiful analogy. And I think that feels so respectful as a learner to know that I took the time as a student to share with my teacher what I understood. And from that, I almost got a catered meal back, right? Here's my path as to how I'm going to move forward, and to have those resources, as I was saying before, all ready to go. That's the challenge that I know a lot of my colleagues find is we might know where a student is, but with all the students in the class, to create that path for each student or even groups of students is a really time consuming, important task, but sometimes you don't have the time to do it for each class, right? So to have these places to go where it's mapped out is really
absolutely
fun.
And I do have to say that, our teacher designers had a hard time finding the just the right resources for LT, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of great research and decades of research on how students learn that we know. But having it usable, I think, is another thing. And so, I would love for you all to reach out if this is kind of the approach that you loved. Maybe you want to try with your colleagues, your team next year. Shoot me an email. I mean, this is the kind of work that I love doing and sharing. So I'd be really happy to share the resources, or even take some of the research that we know and translate it in a way that's like usable. I think that's really powerful, and something that we need in the field right now. So, but yeah, it's getting ready for dinner time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know there's a big round of applause going out for everyone who is watching. I've enjoyed it tremendously. I know I'm excited to dive into these resources. So thank you for your time, your expertise. There was a comment up here about hoping to connect at in-person events. I'm looking forward to that as well. So hopefully for some folks on the call, we will be able to connect in a virtual event like these, but also back into in-person events. So a lot of round of applause and thank yous coming in, which is great. I'm just going to give a final plug here. We have our final event in our Mathagon series for this school year in 2 weeks. You can find it at mathagon.org/PD, and it is our Teacher Share webinar. I'll put the graphic up here on the screen again. Amanda, Antoinette, Eric, Evan, Manoli, and Molly, who has been in the chat. Maybe we have some other folks with us tonight. We have 6 amazing educators who are going to share how they've used Polypad and other tools of Mathagon in their classroom this year. So that's 2 weeks from tonight. This has been a real treat. Oh, I didn't have my slide up there. There are the pictures of the 6 amazing educators whose names that I shared. And you can find that at mathagon.org/PD, which is a great place to go if you want to learn more about Mathagon. Again, everything here is free for students and teachers around the world. So with that being said, I will put this down again. Say thank you again so much, Jen. It was a real honor and a treat to have you. Thanks for putting the time in and the expertise. And I missed all these thank yous coming in the chat. So let's just put these up there. Yeah, this was great. Some new voices. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks for coming, everyone. I will end the webinar. Hope you all have a great night. Jen, any final closing words?
No, thank you. Everybody enjoy your summer and come back recharged and ready to go. And please keep in touch. And Molly for president. Yes.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks a lot.